Cursed Island. You will hear in this video. In the aftermath of a violent storm, a man was thrown overboard while fishing and washed ashore on a deserted island. At first, everything seemed normal. He focused on survival, gathering what little food and fresh water he could find and building a makeshift shelter from palm leaves and driftwood. The days blurred together as he adjusted to his new reality, but something about the island felt off. As he ventured deeper into the jungle, he began to notice subtle, unsettling details. A cave he explored twisted into a labyrinth of passages, but no matter how carefully he marked his path, he always ended up back at the beach. The wildlife, initially seeming ordinary, began to display strange behaviors: silent birds with unblinking eyes, and deer with twisted antlers that appeared to be watching him. A waterfall he stumbled upon ran in reverse, the water flowing upwards into the sky. The island was changing, and the more he explored, the more it felt as if it was warping his sense of time and direction. The unease grew into a gnawing fear as he realized the island was not just a place, but something far more sinister, something that wanted him to stay forever. Part 1. The Tempest. The ocean was a wild and untamed beast, filled with unbridled fury and wrath. The waves, like obsidian towers, loomed menacingly above, each one seemingly intent on devouring my fragile fishing vessel. The storm had descended with a terrifying suddenness, as if conjured by some malevolent force. The sky, once clear, had been consumed by a roiling mass of ominous clouds that gathered with alarming speed. Lightning tore through the heavens, blinding and savage, illuminating the pandemonium that surrounded me. Water crashing from all sides, the boat creaking and groaning under the relentless assault. I clung desperately to the boat's edge, my fingers numb with cold, my knuckles pale with fear, praying fervently for the strength to endure. Then it struck. A massive wave hit with such force that the boat bucked wildly, and in a heartbeat I was hurled into the frigid embrace of the ocean. The icy water engulfed me, and for an agonizing moment I was submerged in a void of darkness, tumbling and twisting as the waves dragged me deeper into their clutches. My limbs flailed as I struggled against the sea, lungs burning for want of air. Somehow, through sheer desperation, I managed to break the surface, gasping and choking, only to be immediately pummeled by another wave that sent me tumbling anew. How long I fought against the sea, I cannot say. Time lost all meaning, each second stretching into an eternity of cold, fear, and exhaustion. My strength waned, the numbing cold sapping my energy until I feared this would be my end. Just as I was on the verge of surrender, my foot struck something solid beneath the swirling water. Sand, coarse and gritty beneath my toes, and with the last of my strength, I clawed my way onto it, coughing and shivering, barely aware of the tempest still raging behind me. When at last I opened my eyes, the world had transformed into an eerie, unsettling calm. The storm had moved on, leaving behind a sky of sullen gray and a sea that churned with remnants of its former violence. I lay on a beach, the sand beneath me cold and damp, my clothes drenched and clinging to my skin. Every muscle throbbed with pain, my body battered and bruised by the sea. But I was alive. Forcing myself to sit up, my head swam with the effort. The beach stretched out in both directions, a narrow band of sand bordered by a thick, impenetrable wall of jungle. The ocean, though still turbulent, had receded into the distance, its waves crashing rhythmically against the shore, a haunting reminder of how close I had come to drowning. My eyes scoured the horizon for any sign of the boat, or of other survivors, but there was nothing. Only me and this desolate island. Survival became my immediate concern. I needed water, food, and shelter, basic necessities to sustain me until I could devise a plan to escape this forsaken place. With legs trembling from exertion, I rose and turned towards the jungle. It was dense and foreboding, the trees towering like ancient guardians, their leaves a dark, almost otherworldly green. Somewhere within that tangled mass, I had to find fresh water. Without it, my time here would be short. The jungle was a formidable adversary. The undergrowth was thick and tangled, each step an arduous task as I pushed through vines and roots that seemed determined to trip me up. The air hung heavy with humidity, the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves filling my lungs. As I ventured deeper into the island's interior, a growing sense of unease settled over me. It was as if unseen eyes were tracking my every move. Yet whenever I turned to look, there was nothing, just trees, shadows, and silence. After what felt like hours of trudging through the dense vegetation, I was rewarded with the faint sound of running water. Hope flared within me, and I forced my way through the undergrowth until I stumbled upon a small stream, its water clear and cool as it cascaded over smooth stones. I dropped to my knees and drank deeply, the icy water soothing my parched throat and momentarily alleviating the fear and exhaustion that gripped me. I spent the remainder of the day exploring the area around the stream, marking my path carefully as I went. I found a few trees bearing fruit, small and bitter, their taste sharp on my tongue, but they quelled the gnawing hunger in my belly. Nearby, I discovered a natural shelter, a spot where the trees formed an interwoven canopy, their branches creating a sheltered space beneath. It wasn't much, but it would suffice for the night. As dusk fell, the island transformed into a symphony of nocturnal sounds, the chirping and croaking of unseen creatures, the rustle of leaves stirred by the wind, and occasionally the distant cry of something unknown. But amidst the natural chorus of the jungle, there was something else, an unsettling feeling that I could not shake. It was as though the island itself was watching me, the trees and shadows concealing eyes that eluded my gaze. I lay on the hard ground, staring up at the dark shapes of the branches above, trying to quell the rising dread within me. Sleep, when it came, was fitful and plagued by nightmares, visions of dark, swirling waters and whispering voices that seemed to come from all around. When I awoke in the morning, the sensation of being observed was stronger than ever, an invisible presence weighing heavily on me. I knew I couldn't remain in one place indefinitely. There had to be more to this island, something that could aid my survival or, better still, lead to my escape. With the uneasy feeling that I was venturing into something far more perilous than the storm I had survived, I set out once more, following the stream as it wound its way deeper into the jungle. Yet, the deeper I ventured, the more disoriented I became. The jungle seemed to shift and warp around me, the trees growing denser, their roots and branches intertwining to form a labyrinth of wood and vines. The sense of being watched intensified with each step, a cold dread that coiled around my heart and refused to let go. And then, just as I was about to abandon my quest and turn back, I heard it, a faint rhythmic tapping emanating from somewhere ahead. I halted, straining to identify the sound. It was distant but distinct, metal striking stone, slow and methodical. Though I could not see the source, the sound sent a shiver down my spine. Every instinct told me to retreat, but something, curiosity, desperation, or perhaps a deeper primal urge, compelled me to press on, to confront whatever lay at the heart of this enigmatic island. I pushed through the thick foliage, the tapping growing louder with each step. The trees began to thin, revealing a small clearing. At its center stood a massive stone edifice, ancient and weathered, its surface cloaked in moss and vines. The rhythmic tapping echoed from within its dark recesses, a slow, deliberate cadence that reverberated through the stillness. My heart pounded as I approached the entrance, a gaping maw of darkness that seemed to devour the light. I hesitated at the threshold, every fiber of my being urging me to flee. But an inexplicable force drew me closer, compelling me to peer into the abyss. The tapping ceased, and an oppressive silence fell over the clearing, pressing in on me like a tangible weight. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of movement at the edge of the clearing. My heart leaped in my chest, and I spun around. But there was nothing, only the jungle, silent and still, observing. Panic seized me, and I turned and bolted, crashing through the undergrowth, heedless of the direction as long as it led away from that cursed place. The jungle seemed to close in around me, the shadows deepening, the sensation of being pursued growing ever more acute. When at last I stumbled to a halt, breathless and disoriented, I realized with a sinking heart that I was hopelessly lost. The jungle had swallowed me whole, and now it felt as though it was biding its time, waiting for me to make my next inevitable mistake. Part 2. Survival Instinct. The first glimmers of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the jungle in muted shades of gray and green. As I emerged from the restless fog of sleep, the events of the previous day played in a relentless loop in my mind. The violent storm, my harrowing arrival on this mysterious island, and that unnerving tapping sound, which still lingered like an unwelcome echo in my thoughts. The boundary between nightmare and reality had blurred, leaving me questioning everything I had experienced. But I had no luxury of time to dwell on uncertainties. Survival was not a choice, it was a necessity. The jungle, dense and overwhelming, loomed around me like a living entity, its ancient trees and thick undergrowth forming a labyrinth that was as intimidating as it was treacherous. The unease that had taken root in my gut the day before had only deepened. But I could not afford to let fear consume me. I needed to focus on the essentials: food, water, and a plan to escape this forsaken island. My first task was to gather supplies. The small stream I had discovered the previous day would be my lifeline, a source of fresh water in this unfamiliar wilderness. I retraced my steps, following the stream upstream with cautious determination, carefully marking my path as I went. The jungle was eerily quiet this morning, the usual symphony of bird song and insect chatter subdued, as if the island itself was holding its breath in anticipation of something unknown. The more I explored, the more I realized how alien this place was. The trees towered above, their massive roots twisting through the earth like serpents, while the canopy overhead was so thick that it blotted out the sky in places, casting the jungle floor into perpetual twilight. Occasionally I caught fleeting glimpses of movement in the underbrush, small creatures darting away at my approach. But whatever inhabited this island was cautious, keeping to the shadows. As I ventured deeper into the jungle, I encountered several trees bearing strange, unfamiliar fruits. Their shapes and colors were unlike anything I had seen before, and I hesitated before sampling them. Carefully, I tasted a few, spitting out anything that seemed bitter or had a strange aftertaste. I took only what I needed, mindful of the potential dangers that lurked in this uncharted territory. Despite my cautious optimism, the island's oppressive atmosphere began to weigh on me. The air was thick and stifling, not just with humidity, but with something intangible, an unsettling energy that seeped into my bones. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. It felt as though the island was alive, watching my every move, waiting for me to make a mistake. By midday, I had managed to gather enough food to last a few days, a mix of fruits, roots, and whatever else I could find that seemed edible. I returned to the stream, where I filled my water container and took a moment to rest. As I sat by the water's edge, trying to quiet my racing thoughts, a familiar sound reached my ears. The same rhythmic tapping I had heard the day before. My skin prickled with unease. This time I couldn't be sure if the sound was real or a figment of my imagination. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. A slow, deliberate beat that seemed to reverberate through the trees. My rational mind told me to ignore it, to focus on survival, but the insistent tug of curiosity was impossible to resist. Before I knew it, I was on my feet, muscles tense, senses heightened. The tapping seemed to call to me, drawing me toward it like a siren's song. I hesitated, torn between the need to investigate and the fear of what I might uncover. In the end, the pull was too strong. I made the decision to follow the sound, driven by a mixture of dread and an inexplicable urge to confront whatever was behind it. As I moved closer to the source, the jungle seemed to close in around me, the shadows deepening, the air growing colder. The tapping grew louder, more distinct with each step, each strike sending a chill down my spine. My heart raced in time with the sound, thudding in my chest as if trying to escape the confines of my ribcage. I pushed through the dense foliage, driven by a strange compulsion that I could neither understand nor resist. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the tapping stopped. I froze, every muscle in my body tensed, ears straining to catch the faintest sound. The silence that followed was deafening, pressing in on me from all sides like a physical weight. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, waiting, listening, but the tapping did not resume. When I finally dared to move, it was with a growing sense of unease that I couldn't shake. The jungle around me felt different, the shadows darker, the air thicker with foreboding. It was then that I realized I had wandered into a small clearing, eerily similar to the one where I had first encountered the tapping. In the center of the clearing stood a massive boulder, its surface worn and weathered by time, strange symbols etched into its face. A chill ran down my spine as I gazed upon the symbols. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen before, intricate, almost otherworldly, their patterns seeming to shift and change the longer I stared at them. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me as I approached the boulder, as if I were intruding upon something ancient and sacred, something that was not meant to be disturbed. I reached out tentatively, my fingers brushing against the cold stone as I traced the lines of one of the symbols. The boulder was icy to the touch, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the jungle, and the sensation sent a shiver through me. For a moment, nothing happened, and I began to wonder if the tapping had been nothing more than a figment of my imagination. But then, the ground beneath my feet began to tremble, and a low rumbling sound echoed through the clearing. I stumbled back in shock, my heart pounding as the symbols on the boulder began to emit a faint, eerie glow, a sickly green light that pulsed in time with the rumbling. The air grew colder still, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Panic gripped me, and I turned to flee, but the jungle seemed to close in around me, the trees looming larger, the shadows growing longer and darker. The ground shook violently now, the rumbling rising to a deafening roar. I ran blindly, crashing through the undergrowth with no regard for direction, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from that boulder, away from whatever malevolent force had been awakened on this island. When I finally stopped, gasping for air, I realized with a sinking feeling that I was completely lost. The jungle, which had seemed so dense and impenetrable before, now felt alive, as though it had shifted and rearranged itself in my panic. The clearing, the boulder, the symbols, they were all gone, as if they had never existed. Exhausted and disoriented, I sank to the ground, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. The island had changed, warped around me, and I was no longer certain of anything. The paths I had carefully marked were nowhere to be found, and I was left alone in this dark, twisted landscape. It was in that moment, as I sat there in the oppressive silence, that I understood the true nature of this island. This was no ordinary place. It was ancient, malevolent, and far more powerful than I had ever imagined. The island did not want me to leave. It had claimed me, drawn me into its depths, and now it was toying with me, testing my resolve. But I could not give in to despair. I had to survive. Somehow I had to find a way to outlast whatever dark force was at work here. My chances of escape were slim, but I could not afford to lose hope. The island might have the upper hand, but I would not go down without a fight. With renewed determination, I rose to my feet, brushing the dirt from my clothes. I would keep moving, keep searching for a way out. The island had thrown its worst at me, but I was still standing. And as long as I had breath in my body, I would continue to fight. But deep down, in the corners of my mind that I dared not dwell upon, I knew that my time was running out. The island had claimed me, and it was only a matter of time before it decided my fate. Part 3. Strange Discoveries. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the jungle bathed in shades of twilight. I had wandered through the dense foliage for hours, my mind still haunted by the ominous encounter with the boulder. The island had morphed into an ever-shifting maze, its once familiar paths now an indistinguishable blur. Frustration and exhaustion had set in, and I knew I needed rest if I hoped to tackle whatever lay ahead. I stumbled upon a small clearing and decided to set up a temporary camp. The air was unnervingly quiet, the usual hum of insects and birds conspicuously absent. As I gathered dry leaves and twigs for a fire, an unsettling sensation prickled at the back of my neck, a sensation that I was being watched. I dismissed it as the lingering effects of the day's events, but the feeling persisted, gnawing at my nerves. The fire crackled to life, its warm glow casting flickering shadows that danced across the clearing. I settled by the fire, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Yet no matter how hard I tried, my mind kept drifting back to the strange symbols on the boulder and the mysterious rumbling that had followed. What had I uncovered? Why did it feel as though the island itself was conspiring to lead me into danger? As the firelight played across the surrounding trees, I noticed something peculiar. The shadows seemed to move in ways that defied the logic of the light. They stretched and contracted, twisting in patterns that seemed almost alive. I squinted, trying to make sense of the strange phenomenon, but the shadows continued their eerie dance, slipping in and out of shape as if mocking my attempts to understand them. Suddenly, a soft rustling noise came from the edge of the clearing. My heart leapt into my throat, and I grabbed a stick from the fire, using it as a makeshift weapon. The rustling grew louder, and a figure emerged from the darkness. It was a deer, but not like any deer I had ever seen. Its eyes were unnervingly human-like, reflecting the firelight with an eerie intelligence. It stared at me, its gaze unsettling and unblinking. I held my breath, unsure of what to do. The deer stood motionless, its presence almost spectral. After what felt like an eternity, the deer turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I was left wondering what kind of place this was, and what significance the deer might hold. Everything on this island seemed to be connected in some inscrutable way, part of a larger, more sinister design. Determined to find answers, I decided to explore the area around the clearing further. With the fading light, I packed up my belongings and ventured deeper into the jungle. The shadows around me seemed to grow darker, the air cooler. It was as though I was stepping into a different realm, one that existed just beyond the edge of reality. My exploration led me to a grove of trees arranged in a perfect circle, their branches intertwined in an unnatural manner. The ground was covered with strange bioluminescent fungi that emitted a soft, greenish glow. The sight was both mesmerizing and unsettling. I reached out to touch one of the fungi, but as soon as my fingers brushed against it, the glow flickered and dimmed. I pulled back, a wave of dread washing over me. The grove seemed to pulsate with a subtle rhythm, as if it were alive, and the air grew colder, filled with an almost tangible sense of malevolence. Despite my growing apprehension, I pressed on. The grove led me to a small, dark cave hidden among the trees. The entrance was nearly obscured by thick vines and dense undergrowth. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and desperation, I entered the cave, my flashlight casting narrow beams of light across the walls. Inside, the cave was surprisingly spacious, with a network of passages leading in various directions. The air was cool and damp, and the walls were adorned with strange markings similar to those on the boulder. They seemed to tell a story, though their meaning eluded me. The deeper I ventured, the more disoriented I became, the passages twisting and turning in a labyrinthine pattern that made it difficult to keep track of my location. Eventually, I came across a chamber with a small pool of water at its center. The water was eerily still, its surface reflecting the faint light from my flashlight. As I approached, I noticed shapes moving beneath the surface, shadows that writhed and shifted in a way that seemed almost alive. I leaned closer to get a better look when a faint, high-pitched whispering began to fill the air. The voices were unintelligible, like a language I couldn't understand. The sounds seemed to come from all directions, growing louder and more insistent. My heart raced and I backed away, the oppressive atmosphere pressing in on me. I turned to leave the cave, my senses on high alert. As I retraced my steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. The whispering continued, growing louder with each step I took. When I finally emerged from the cave, gasping for breath, the whispering abruptly ceased. The jungle outside was silent once more, the oppressive atmosphere returning. I made my way back to the clearing, the shadows stretching and twisting as I passed through them. The sense of being watched was stronger than ever, and the feeling that the island was a living entity with its own dark agenda only intensified. Back at the clearing, I tried to calm myself, but sleep was elusive. The shadows outside the firelight danced and twisted, the whispers from the cave echoing in my mind. The sense of dread hung over me like a thick fog. I had only scratched the surface of the island's secrets, and I couldn't help but wonder what other dark revelations awaited me in the darkness. I knew I needed to remain cautious and keep moving. The island was a place of ancient, malevolent forces, and the path to escape was shrouded in mystery. As I stared into the fire, I resolved to uncover the truth about this cursed place and hopefully find a way out before it was too late. Part 4. The Caves. The next morning dawned with a heavy, oppressive weight, a residue of the dread that had clung to me all night. Despite my restless sleep, I resolved to press on. The caves had intrigued and terrified me in equal measure, and I was determined to uncover more about the island's disturbing phenomena. After a quick breakfast of foraged fruits, I returned to the cave entrance. The grove, bathed in the eerie green glow of bioluminescent fungi, seemed more foreboding than ever. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and stepped into the cave, the cool, damp air immediately enveloping me. The cave system was an intricate labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, each more disorienting than the last. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing walls etched with cryptic symbols that seemed to pulse with an unnatural light. The markings were reminiscent of those on the boulder, and their pulsating glow suggested a life of their own. Navigating the narrow passages, I heard the constant drip of water echoing through the tunnels, creating a rhythm that both soothed and unsettled me. I carefully marked the walls with small scratches to avoid getting lost. However, the labyrinthine nature of the caves made it difficult to keep track of my location, as the passages twisted and turned in impossible ways. The further I ventured, the stranger the chambers became. One chamber held an underground lake with water that shimmered with an unsettling iridescence. The clarity of the water revealed strange, shifting shapes beneath the surface, creating an eerie and mesmerizing effect. I approached cautiously, my flashlight casting long, distorted reflections on the water's surface. In another chamber, I discovered an ancient altar covered in dust and cobwebs. The altar was adorned with more of the cryptic symbols, surrounded by offerings of rotting fruits, bones, and fragments of human clothing. The sight made my skin crawl, and I felt a profound sense of intrusion, as if I had stumbled upon a sacred and malevolent place. The deeper I went, the more I felt the weight of unseen eyes upon me. It was as if the cave itself was aware of my presence, reacting to my every move. Shadows flickered and shifted in response to my passage, creating an atmosphere of growing paranoia. After what felt like hours of navigating the twisting tunnels, I arrived at a chamber dominated by a large circular stone slab. The slab was covered in intricate carvings, and a faint rhythmic vibration emanated from it. The carvings depicted disturbing scenes of ritual sacrifice, with figures performing ceremonies around an altar. The imagery was unsettling and seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. The vibration from the slab grew stronger as I approached, reverberating through the ground. I tried to decipher the carvings, but they blurred together, forming patterns that defied comprehension. The growing intensity of the vibration and the oppressive energy in the chamber made my heart race. Suddenly, a low, rumbling sound echoed through the chamber, similar to the one I had heard before. The ground trembled beneath me, and the stone slab began to glow with an eerie light. A cold draft swept through the chamber, thickening the already oppressive air. Panic surged through me. The realization that I was not alone in the cave hit me hard. The rumbling grew louder, and shadows at the edge of my flashlight's beam seemed to move with a life of their own. I turned to leave, but the tunnel shifted around me, warping and changing in an increasingly disorienting manner. I fled through the twisting tunnels, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The shadows appeared to close in, their movements synchronized with mine. Faint whispers echoed through the caverns, growing louder and more insistent with every step I took. The sense of being pursued was overwhelming. Finally, I burst out of the cave, gasping for air. The jungle outside was dark, the dense canopy obscuring the last vestiges of daylight. I stumbled back to the clearing, my heart pounding with adrenaline and fear. The oppressive weight of the cave's secrets still clung to me. Back at the clearing, I struggled to calm myself. The island seemed to be actively toying with me, leading me deeper into its dark heart. The caves had revealed only a fraction of the island's true nature, and I knew that there were more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Yet with each step, the island's grip tightened, making escape seem increasingly elusive. I needed to find a way out of this labyrinthine nightmare. The caves had shown me that the island was not merely a place, but a living entity, actively working against me. I had to remain vigilant and keep pushing forward, for every step seemed to bring me closer to the island's malevolent core, where something dark and ancient awaited. Part 5. The Reverse Waterfall. The night had passed with only sporadic rest, the haunting visions of the cave and its dark secrets still vivid in my mind. As dawn's light filtered through the dense canopy, I felt a renewed sense of urgency. The island's eerie grip on me seemed to tighten with each passing hour, and I needed answers. Determined, I set out along a new path through the jungle, guided by a persistent sense of déjà vu. The dense foliage seemed to shift subtly, and the island's oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on me. My flashlight had died the previous night, leaving me with only the dim light of morning to navigate by. The jungle grew denser as I moved forward, the humidity thick and suffocating. Vines twisted around my legs, making each step a battle against the encroaching undergrowth. Despite my best efforts, I felt as though the island itself was conspiring to disorient me, the terrain morphing in ways that felt almost deliberate. Hours of trudging through the oppressive jungle led me to a sight that made me pause in disbelief. A waterfall cascaded from a cliff face, but it defied all natural laws. Instead of flowing downward, the water surged upward, creating a surreal and unsettling spectacle. The water shimmered in the pale light, moving against the force of gravity with an almost hypnotic quality. As I approached the reverse waterfall, the air grew colder and damp. The sight was both mesmerizing and disturbing, hinting at a force beyond the natural order. The roar of the waterfall was deafening, yet it was accompanied by a faint whispering, barely audible over the rushing water. The whispers seemed to come from every direction, carried on the wind in a ghostly chorus. The chill in the air intensified as I drew closer. The water's surface was unnaturally smooth and reflective, hiding strange shapes that shifted and writhed just beneath the surface. Driven by curiosity, I reached out to touch the water. As soon as my fingers made contact, a jolt of cold electricity surged through me, accompanied by a strange pressure, as though the water was trying to pull me in. Alarmed, I pulled back, my heart racing. The whispers grew louder, forming a cacophony that seemed to echo through the mist rising from the waterfall. I backed away, struggling to make sense of the experience. The waterfall was a manifestation of the island's unnatural power, and its very existence suggested that the island was governed by rules beyond my understanding. Determined to find answers, I decided to follow the stream that fed the waterfall. The path alongside the stream was treacherous, with slick rocks and dense vegetation slowing my progress. The air grew colder, and the whispering continued, now a constant, unsettling presence. After a short while, I reached the source of the stream, a small underground spring bubbling up from the ground. The spring was clear and pristine, its water flowing steadily into the stream that fed the reverse waterfall. The area around the spring was eerily calm, and the whispering seemed to fade away. I knelt by the spring, examining the surroundings for any signs of disturbance. The ground was covered in glowing fungi similar to those I had encountered in the cave. These fungi emitted a soft greenish light, casting an eerie glow over the spring. As I studied the fungi, I noticed faint ethereal patterns in the air, like ghostly wisps of light dancing around the spring. The patterns shifted and changed, forming intricate shapes that seemed almost recognizable but defied comprehension. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized that the spring was more than just a source of water. It was a focal point of the island's supernatural energy. The waterfall, the whispering, the glowing fungi, all of it was connected, part of a larger, incomprehensible force at work on this island. The natural order had been twisted, and the island's power was palpable, almost tangible. As I continued to explore the area around the spring, I felt a heightened sense of being watched. The whispers had faded, but their lingering presence was a haunting reminder of the island's secrets. The spring and the reverse waterfall were only pieces of a larger puzzle, and I knew I needed to stay vigilant if I hoped to uncover the truth and find a way to escape the island's grasp. With each discovery, the island's dark heart seemed to draw closer, and I understood that the answers I sought were deeply entwined with the island's malevolent force. My journey was far from over, and the true nature of the island awaited, hidden in its twisted and mysterious depths. Part 6. The Watching Eyes. As twilight descended, I left the reverse waterfall behind, my thoughts plagued by the unsettling events of the day. The island seemed to grow darker and more oppressive, with the jungle canopy blocking out the last vestiges of daylight. My flashlight flickered sporadically, adding to the pervasive sense of unease. Navigating through the increasingly dense jungle, I felt as though the trees and foliage were closing in on me. Shadows danced just beyond my vision, and the sensation of being watched was inescapable. The underbrush rustled periodically, but each time I turned to look, there was nothing there. The feeling of being observed grew stronger with every step, a constant reminder of the island's enigmatic presence. Night fell quickly, and the usual nighttime symphony of jungle sounds was conspicuously absent. An unnatural silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the occasional creak of the trees and the distant eerie call of a bird. This silence amplified my growing sense of dread. I stumbled upon a small clearing, and despite the oppressive darkness, decided it would be a safer place to make camp. The clearing was encircled by dense foliage, providing a semblance of security. I quickly set up my shelter and lit a fire, the crackling flames offering a modicum of comfort in the encroaching gloom. As I sat by the fire, attempting to steady my nerves, I noticed something disturbing. The shadows cast by the flames moved independently, stretching and contorting in unnatural ways. I focused on the fire to dispel my discomfort, but the shadows continued their eerie dance, their movements almost hypnotic. A soft rustling in the nearby bushes drew my attention. I swung my flashlight around, but the dense foliage revealed nothing. I tried to rationalize the sound as either the wind or a small animal, but the pervasive feeling of being watched persisted. It was as if the jungle itself were alive and observing me. The whispers from the reverse waterfall returned, faint yet persistent, echoing through the night. They seemed to be carried on the wind, forming an indistinct, haunting chorus that came from every direction. I strained to decipher the words, but they remained elusive, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Driven by growing paranoia, I decided to investigate the source of the rustling. Grabbing my flashlight, I ventured into the darkness, my heart racing with each step. The jungle was thick and oppressive, the shadows stretching and distorting as the firelight faded. I came across a small makeshift nest, made of twigs and leaves. It looked oddly pristine, as though it had been recently constructed. There were no signs of what might have made it or why it was there, heightening my sense of unease. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and the feeling of being watched intensified. Suddenly, I caught a fleeting glimpse of movement at the edge of my vision. I swung my flashlight around, but the darkness revealed nothing. The shadows seemed to shift, lengthening and deepening, as if they were conspiring against me. The sense of being surrounded by unseen eyes became almost unbearable. I hurried back to the clearing, my nerves frayed and my mind racing. The firelight seemed to offer little comfort now, the shadows around me growing more menacing. I sat by the fire, trying to focus on its warmth, but the whispers and the feeling of being observed made it impossible to relax. As the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, becoming a constant, haunting presence that seemed to encroach upon me. The weight of the jungle pressed down, and the sensation of being watched was almost suffocating. The shadows danced more erratically around the clearing, their movements unpredictable and unsettling. I knew I needed rest, but sleep was elusive. The island's dark presence seemed to seep into my very being, filling me with an overwhelming sense of dread. I tried to keep my thoughts focused on finding a way out, but the feeling of being observed was so pervasive it was hard to think clearly. In the darkness, it dawned on me that the island was more than just a physical place. It was a living entity, thriving on fear and confusion. The eyes I felt upon me were not merely figments of my imagination. They were part of the island's malevolent consciousness, a constant reminder of its power over me. The night dragged on, and I remained by the fire, my mind a tumult of fear and uncertainty. The island's watching eyes seemed to mock my efforts, their presence a constant reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. As the fire dwindled and darkness closed in, I knew I had to remain vigilant. The island was alive, and it was determined to break me. Part 7. The Endless Loop. When dawn finally broke through the oppressive canopy, I was already on the move. The night had been a torment of whispers and shadows, my sleep disturbed by relentless nightmares and the chilling silence of the jungle. Determined to escape the suffocating darkness, I packed up my meager belongings and ventured out, hoping for a change of fortune. The jungle, however, was as disorienting as ever. The path I followed, though seemingly new, felt increasingly familiar. With each step, the sense of déjà vu grew stronger, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was moving in circles. The more I walked, the more convinced I became that the island was playing tricks on me. I aimed for higher ground, hoping that a vantage point might provide some clarity. The climb was arduous, the path overgrown with thick vines and gnarled roots that threatened to trip me at every turn. The sensation of being watched never left me, the whispers from the previous night still echoing faintly in my mind. After what felt like hours of climbing, I reached a small plateau. The view from there was both breathtaking and discouraging. The dense canopy of the jungle stretched endlessly in every direction, offering no clear signs of where I was or how to escape. The landscape seemed to merge into a single, unending expanse of green. Frustrated, I began my descent, hoping to find a different route. However, as I made my way back down, the sense of disorientation intensified. The paths I had taken seemed to have changed, presenting me with new, unfamiliar obstacles. The jungle appeared to shift subtly, almost as if it were mocking my attempts to navigate through it. Hours of aimless wandering led me back to a clearing I had visited before. The twisted trees and bioluminescent fungi, which had seemed so alien the first time, now felt like a cruel déjà vu. It was as if the island had deliberately brought me back to the same spot, reinforcing the notion that I was trapped in an endless loop. Panic surged through me as the full extent of the situation became clear. The island was manipulating my sense of direction, ensnaring me in a cycle of repetition. No matter how far I traveled or which path I took, I was always drawn back to the same places. The island seemed determined to keep me in its grasp. Desperation took hold as I tried to retrace my steps, but with every turn, the paths seemed to twist and change, the trees moving to form new barriers. The sense of being trapped grew more oppressive, and I could feel the jungle closing in around me. The realization that the island was toying with me was nearly unbearable. I was caught in a nightmare of my own making, unable to escape its cruel games. My attempts to find a way out only seemed to lead me deeper into its labyrinthine grip. As the sun began to set, the jungle darkened and became more oppressive. The shadows lengthened, and the eerie whispers returned, their voices a constant reminder of the island's malevolent presence. The weight of the island's power pressed down on me, palpable and inescapable. I set up camp once more in the clearing, hoping that rest might offer some clarity, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. The shadows around me seemed to stretch and contort, their movements erratic and unsettling. The flickering firelight cast distorted shapes on the surrounding trees, offering little comfort. The night settled in, and I sat by the fire, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. The endless loop was a cruel trap designed to break my spirit and drive me to madness. I knew I had to remain vigilant, to outwit the island's manipulations and find a way to escape. The whispers grew louder, a haunting chorus that filled the night with dread. The sensation of being surrounded by unseen eyes was relentless, a constant reminder of the island's control over my fate. I had to find a way to break free from the cycle, to overcome the island's dark magic and reclaim my freedom. The night was long and fraught with anxiety, each passing hour a test of my resolve. The island's endless loop was a sinister game with no apparent end. But as darkness enveloped me, I knew I had to keep fighting. I had to break the cycle and uncover the truth behind the island's malevolent power, no matter the cost. Part 8. The Sinister Presence. The relentless cycle of the island seemed to tighten around me as days blurred into one another. Despite my best efforts, I found myself increasingly disoriented, unable to distinguish one path from another. The jungle felt like a malevolent maze, and the creeping paranoia had become a constant companion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the jungle grew dark, an unsettling shift in the atmosphere caught my attention. An eerie, low hum filled the air, coming from all directions. It was a faint, almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to seep into my bones. I glanced around, but the dense foliage and deepening shadows offered no clues to its origin. I tried to push aside the disturbing hum, focusing instead on gathering what little food I could find and maintaining a small fire. But as night deepened, the sensation of being watched became unbearable. Shadows moved on their own, flickering and darting just outside the reach of my firelight. The familiar rustling of the jungle had taken on a menacing quality, as if the very darkness conspired against me. A sudden movement at the edge of my vision made me whirl around. My flashlight cut through the darkness, but found nothing. The figure I had glimpsed seemed to vanish whenever I tried to focus on it. The sense of being watched intensified, my pulse quickening with every heartbeat. The whispers from the reverse waterfall had returned, their ghostly echoes merging with the low hum. They were faint yet persistent, a disjointed chorus that wove through the night air. Determined to confront whatever was causing this unsettling presence, I ventured into the jungle, my flashlight beam piercing the thick undergrowth. The darkness felt almost tangible, the whispering voices growing louder, their tone increasingly insistent. Though the words remained indistinct, their rising volume made the air feel heavier, thick with a sense of anticipation. As I ventured deeper, the oppressive atmosphere closed in around me. The shadows seemed to lengthen and shift, their movements becoming erratic and unpredictable. The sense of dread grew overwhelming, as if something sinister lurked just beyond the edge of light. The rustling of leaves became louder and more rhythmic, mimicking my steps with unnerving precision. I stumbled upon a small, secluded clearing that was eerily quiet. The air was heavy with an unnatural chill, and the whispering seemed to emanate from the ground itself. I knelt down, my flashlight revealing strange markings etched into the dirt, patterns that resembled ancient symbols I had seen in the cave. The symbols formed an intricate hypnotic design that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. The markings were accompanied by a chilling sight, a circle of small, charred remains in the center of the clearing. The remnants of what appeared to be ritualistic offerings surrounded an ancient stone altar. The altar was covered in more cryptic symbols, and the air around it was thick with foreboding. The burnt remains were still warm, and the acrid smell of smoke lingered, suggesting recent, perhaps even ongoing, rituals. As I examined the altar, a cold wind swept through the clearing, and the temperature dropped sharply. I could feel the oppressive weight of unseen eyes upon me, the whispering voices growing louder, their tone filled with malice. It was as if the clearing itself was alive, its malevolent presence closing in. The shadows around the altar seemed to pool and intensify, reacting to my intrusion. Suddenly the shadows converged, forming a dark, indistinct shape. The figure appeared at the edge of my flashlight's beam, a formless silhouette that was both terrifying and elusive. Its presence felt almost tangible, a malevolent force pressing down on me. The whispers had become a cacophony, a distorted symphony of voices echoing from all directions. I backed away from the altar, my heart racing. The dark figure seemed to follow me, its form shifting and changing with each step. The whispers grew louder, their tone a mixture of triumph and mockery. The clearing seemed to spin, the darkness closing in as if it were alive and hungry. Panicked, I fled back toward the safety of the firelight, my flashlight flickering wildly. The oppressive presence seemed to chase me, its weight bearing down on my shoulders. The whispers grew louder, filled with victorious glee. The jungle warped and twisted around me, the paths shifting as if the island itself conspired to keep me trapped. When I finally reached the clearing with the fire, I collapsed, gasping for breath. The dark figure had vanished, but the sense of being watched remained. The jungle was silent once more, but the lingering dread was a constant reminder of the island's power. The fire crackled weakly, its light barely penetrating the encroaching darkness. As I sat by the fire, it became clear that the island was more than just a physical place. It was a manifestation of something far darker and more sinister. The dark figure, the whispering voices, the oppressive atmosphere, they were all part of the island's design to break me down. to feed off my fear and despair. I needed to confront this malevolence head-on, to uncover the truth behind the island's power and escape its relentless hold. The night stretched on, fraught with terror. The shadows around me shifted and moved in unsettling patterns. I knew I had to remain vigilant, to face the island's malevolent presence and find a way to escape its grasp. The darkness was alive, and it was determined to claim me. Part 9. The Island's Secret. The island's relentless grip was taking its toll. Each night the darkness seemed to close in tighter, and each day offered no respite from the oppressive atmosphere. The whispers and the dark figure had become fixtures in my nightmares, haunting me with their presence and driving me to the edge of sanity. Desperation spurred me forward, urging me to uncover the island's secrets and find a way out. One morning, after another restless night, I came across a narrow, overgrown trail I had not noticed before. The path seemed to lead deeper into the jungle, and something about it felt significant, almost as though it was beckoning me. I decided to follow it, hoping it might lead to answers, or at the very least, provide a fresh perspective on my predicament. The path was difficult, choked with vines and thorny underbrush. The jungle grew denser as I pressed on, the air thick with humidity and the odor of decaying plant matter. The whispers, faint but persistent, reminded me of the island's malevolent presence. After hours of navigating the dense foliage, I emerged into a hidden valley. The sight that greeted me was both breathtaking and unsettling. Towering, ancient trees with gnarled branches seemed to touch the sky. In the center of the valley stood a massive stone structure, partially covered in creeping vines and moss. It was an enormous stone monolith, its surface covered in cryptic symbols and disturbing depictions. The monolith was unlike anything I had seen before. Its carvings were both alien and familiar, depicting scenes of rituals and sacrifices. Figures with exaggerated, hauntingly familiar faces seemed to writhe in eternal torment, their expressions frozen in a grotesque dance of suffering. The symbols surrounding them appeared to be part of an ancient, forgotten cult, one that thrived on fear and darkness. I approached the monolith cautiously, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. As I examined the carvings, a chilling realization began to dawn on me. The scenes on the stone were not just depictions of ancient rituals, they were records of the island's true purpose. The monolith seemed to tell the story of a place that existed not just to ensnare, but to consume, drawing in those who wandered too close and feeding off their fear and despair. The air grew colder as I studied the monolith, and the whispers grew louder, their tone urgent. It was as if the very stone was alive, its carvings a conduit for the island's dark energy. The symbols pulsed with a sinister rhythm, their meaning just beyond my grasp, but undeniably malevolent. Near the base of the monolith, I found a shallow pit filled with remnants of old charred offerings, bones and burnt fragments of what looked like clothing and personal items. The pit was surrounded by more symbols, and a disturbing pattern of bloodstains suggested recent use. It was clear that the island had not just been observing me, it had been feeding off my fear, using it to fuel its dark rituals. A sudden chill ran down my spine as I felt a presence behind me. I spun around, my flashlight cutting erratic beams of light across the valley. The dark figure was there again, its form more solid than before, though still formless and indistinct. It seemed to be watching me, its presence a palpable force that filled the valley with impending doom. The figure's silence was oppressive, and I felt its malevolence pressing down on me. The whispers grew louder, blending into a dissonant chorus. The sense of being surrounded by unseen eyes was overwhelming, and I could no longer distinguish between the shadows and the figure. It was as if the island itself was closing in on me, its darkness consuming everything in its path. I backed away from the monolith, my heart racing. The dark figure seemed to follow me, its presence a constant reminder of the island's power. The valley felt smaller, the oppressive atmosphere making it difficult to breathe. The realization that I had stumbled upon the island's dark heart was both terrifying and liberating. As I fled down the trail, the oppressive weight of the island's malevolence seemed to lift slightly, though the feeling of being pursued remained. The path twisted and turned, the jungle's shadows closing in as if trying to prevent my escape. The whispers became a frantic cacophony, their voices echoing through the trees. When I finally reached the relative safety of my makeshift camp, I collapsed, my mind reeling from the revelation. The island was not just a place of natural beauty. It was a living entity, a predatory force that thrived on fear and despair. The monolith was a testament to its dark purpose, a reminder that the island was not merely a physical location, but a manifestation of something far more sinister. As night fell, the whispers returned, their tone filled with a sense of victory. The dark figure remained elusive, but the oppressive atmosphere was a constant reminder of the island's power. I knew that I had to confront the island's malevolence head-on, to find a way to break free from its grasp and escape its relentless hold. The darkness was alive, and it was determined to claim me. Part 10. The Final Revelation. The island's suffocating darkness hung over me as I prepared for what I feared would be the final confrontation. The revelations from the ancient monolith had been overwhelming, yet they also ignited a steely resolve within me. I now understood that the island wasn't just a place, it was a sentient entity thriving on fear and despair. To escape, I needed to outwit it or become its next victim. The night was unusually still, the jungle's usual rustling subdued as if the island itself were holding its breath. The tension in the air was palpable, pressing down on me like a tangible weight. My makeshift camp felt like a fragile refuge, but I knew it was only temporary. I ventured out with renewed determination, searching for any clue or method that could break the island's hold over me. The dense jungle loomed before me, its shadows deepening as the moon climbed higher. The whispers returned, louder than ever, their dissonant chorus echoing through the trees. They seemed to taunt me, a sinister reminder of the island's power. As I made my way through the darkened jungle, I found myself drawn back to the places I had previously encountered, the waterfall that flowed upwards, the labyrinthine caves. Each location felt like a piece of a larger puzzle, reflecting the island's twisted nature. The sensation of being watched was stronger than ever, the dark figure's presence almost palpable. Eventually, I arrived back at the monolith. The towering stone structure loomed ominously, its carvings illuminated by the moon's pale light. The symbols seemed to emit a faint, eerie glow, their meaning clearer now. It was as if the island was guiding me toward a final confrontation. I approached the monolith, my flashlight casting flickering shadows on its surface. The whispers grew louder, their voices a chaotic blend of anguish and triumph. The dark figure seemed to close in, its malevolence a tangible force that pressed against me. I traced the symbols on the monolith with my fingers. The carvings responded to my touch, the whispers intensifying. I realized that the symbols were not mere markings. They were a key, a way to unlock the island's dark power. The pattern they formed was a ritualistic sigil, a conduit for the island's malevolent energy. Determined to end the cycle, I recited the ancient words I had deciphered from the symbols. My voice trembled, but I forced myself to continue, the words reverberating through the valley. The whispers reached a fever pitch, their tone a mix of rage and desperation. The dark figure seemed to writhe and shift in the shadows, reacting to my actions. As I spoke the final words of the ritual, a powerful surge of energy pulsed through the monolith. The ground beneath me trembled, and a blinding light erupted from the stone, dispersing the oppressive darkness. The whispers crescendoed into a chaotic uproar, their voices filled with anguish and fury. The dark figure emitted a haunting, distorted scream, its form dissipating into the night. The light from the monolith grew brighter, enveloping me in a warm, soothing glow. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the jungle seemed to exhale, its shadows retreating as if defeated. The sense of being watched vanished, replaced by an eerie calm. The island's malevolent presence had been momentarily subdued, but the victory felt bittersweet. Exhausted, I collapsed beside the monolith, my body trembling from the ritual's aftermath. The night was quiet, the oppressive darkness replaced by a serene stillness. I had survived the island's trial, but the experience had left me deeply scarred. The island's dark power was subdued, but its malevolence still lingered, a reminder of the darkness that could lie beneath even the most beautiful facades. As dawn broke, I made my way back to the beach, The journey was long and grueling, but with each step, the sense of freedom grew stronger. The island, now a distant memory, was a testament to the darkness that could ensnare those who ventured too close. The storm that had brought me to the island had long passed, and the calm, serene waters of the ocean contrasted starkly with the turmoil I had endured. I gazed out at the horizon, the knowledge that I had escaped the island's grasp, filling me with a mixture of relief and sadness. The island was no longer a physical place, but a haunting memory, a reminder of the darkness that could lurk beneath even the most beautiful of surfaces. As I sailed away with the sun rising over the ocean, I carried with me the scars of my ordeal. The island's final revelation was a stark reminder of the fragility of the human spirit and the lengths to which one might go to confront the darkness within and without. The experience had changed me, but I had survived, and that was all that mattered. So, my friends, that's the end of the story. You can go to my playlist and see many more interesting scary stories.